Servus Leute und hallo auf den Craft Bike Days 2024. Heute hier mit Nico Molali. Ihr werdet ihn wahrscheinlich kennen, Downhill World Cup Racer, der mittlerweile auch seit 2 Jahren sein eigenes Race-Team hat. Auch sehr erfolgreich mit Acer, der jetzt auch World Champion ist in der Junior-Kategorie. Wir haben ihn hier in Bielefeld im Lenkwerk mit seinem Downhill-Bike, das er mitgebracht hat, um nach der Veranstaltung auch noch ein bisschen trainieren zu gehen mit Angel Suarez. Nico, welcome to the Craft Bike Days.
Thank you.
We are really happy to have you here, that you come over extra for us, let's say.
Yeah, it was really nice to be invited. I've had a great 2 days here.
Yeah, so like the Craft Bike Days, I think it's quite new to you, so this whole event. What's your impression so far?
There's so many passionate people here with a variety of genre of bikes.
Yeah.
I spend a lot of time thinking about my bike and talking with Dan, who helps me with engineering. We talk all the time at races or when we're together. And here there are 100 more people like him. So I've had a lot of in-depth conversations with other people who are doing a similar thing to what I'm doing.
Yeah, I think that's the main goal, to bring, like, let's say, bike nerds together, to like chat with each other and have like maybe something for the future they can like do together or something. And you told me just that you maybe have someone who will work with you maybe in the future. So this is quite a success.
For sure. I've met people that do manufacturing processes that I've never seen before, and people want to collaborate and open my eyes to new ideas. So it's really cool.
That's awesome. For the viewers, maybe we need to introduce you, or maybe you introduce yourself as well. So you're from America, obviously. You're a downhill racer since a lot of years, like
since 2010. So
that's
at
14
the World
years.
Cups,
World Cup level. World Cup level, 14 years. So where are you based? When do you started with your company, with Frameworks? And what's the philosophy behind that? Maybe you can say something about the company itself.
Okay. I'm based in North Carolina. I've been racing World Cups since 2010, so I think this is my 15th season. I started Frameworks in 2022, and the philosophy was just to make a bike that was my version of the perfect bike for racing World Cups. I could feel through my test riding whether it was working and reacting the way I wanted it to. So I wanted to be able to do experiments to make the bike that I wanted.
Yeah.
And the goal was to make a World Cup race bike. And since then, we've offered the same bikes that I race for sale in small batches to the public. It wasn't really the goal in the beginning, but so many people had reached out and shared my idea and believed in the product that I was making and asked when they could buy one. So we offered them for sale to the public this year, and we've sold, between our downhill frame and enduro frame, around 100 frames, which is really cool. That there was that many people interested.
Yeah.
And yeah, when I see them at the bike park with our downhill frames on the shuttle trailer, they're pretty identifiable, being the raw color. It's super proud to see those out there and see the customers happy when they're riding them.
I saw your YouTube channel, like, since the beginning. You're like documenting the whole process and the whole story behind that, more or less. Since you quit with Intense Racing, you started with Frameworks, more or less like immediately.
Yeah.
And you're documenting everything, like from the scratch, when you're beginning, your test rides, your frame building, and where you're going through, like in the process of developing. So currently, we see your DH bike here, so it's a 4-bar system. But I know you tried like the high pivot designs and everything. So, but you stuck to the 4-bar system now. So, what's behind that? Why you don't stick to the high pivot system?
So, my very first project and first experiment when I started Frameworks was to make a high pivot version and a standard version as similar as I can, with only changing the axle path. Of course, there's other small details that go along with either design, but I tried to isolate the variables and only try the high pivot versus standard pivot.
Yeah.
And I could ride both very similarly, and the complexity of the high pivot was more difficult to manufacture. There was more risk involved with racing, with more moving parts, and it was not a clear advantage. So for me, if I can test both and ride both the same speed, then the simpler design makes more sense in my mind. So I went with that. The pivot is probably higher than most other standard pivot height bikes.
So we have kind of rewarded axle path still?
It's very close to a mid-pivot design. So the axle path is very neutral, and I use the O-chain to take care of the added chain tension from the higher pivot, and that's been really working well. I think for a larger company, it's hard to build a bike with an O-chain in mind because it's a niche product. It needs service of its own. They would want the bike to be compatible and working well with a standard chainring. But because I'm small and agile of a company, and in the beginning not even intending to sell it, I was planning to use the O-chain anyway, so I optimized my bike further to use the O-chain.
Yeah. But I'm not sure, but do you still test some high pivot systems or like options?
I recently tried a idler pulley. It didn't change the pivot, but it was a ISCG mounted idler pulley that a friend of mine gave me. He was testing it on his bike, and it was simple, just mounted like a chain guide would. So I could take care of the chain tension with the idler pulley. Moving the chain line up reduces the amount of chain growth that the chain experiences when you go through the travel. And it's a different way of dealing with it than using the O-chain, which rotates backwards to take care of the chain tension.
So this would eliminate the O-chain, or like you tested it without the O-chain then?
Right,
Makes
I tested it without the O-chain. So it was either the idler pulley or the O-chain. And for me, on the downhills, I didn't really notice a big benefit. I could ride the bike the same with either setup. Pedaling, I did notice a difference. With the O-chain was more efficient for pedaling.
Really?
So, I confirmed that my original feeling was still correct. And for me, this is a simple and reliable way to solve the feel that I'm looking for.
So currently you have like the carbon chainstays, seat and chainstay. Is this something you would stick to like in the future as well? Because it's a bit more stiff in general. Is it something that you would like say it's important to have on?
So the reason that I went to that in the beginning was more for manufacturing tolerance. When we were welding the frames ourselves, homemade, it was really hard to get all of those precise pivot points to accurately line up. And even more so on a small part like a chainstay, when it's welded and then heat treated, it can move a little bit. And if your pivots are not all very precisely aligned, then it can create some friction in the suspension system. So with it coming from a carbon fiber mold, they are perfectly aligned. And the rocker pivot is also CNC'd, so that is also perfectly aligned. None of those parts are heat treated. So the whole suspension system performs very smoothly with no friction. The added ride quality is that the unsprung mass is lighter. So this rear end compared to the aluminum version was around 800 grams lighter. So all the parts that are moving with the suspension as the bike is going through the travel react a lot more freely without the added weight. So that was my thought behind that. And then the stiffness, believe it or not, is less than the aluminum version that I had before, based on the tubes that I was using. So I had square tubes. They were pretty big, rectangular square tubes.
Okay, so super stiff, solid.
And they were very stiff. Whereas the 3D shape of this carbon chainstay is smaller, so the stiffness is actually less. Even though it's an assumption that carbon fiber is stiffer than aluminum, I think more the 3D shape that we've used lends itself to not being overly stiff and flexing really nicely from axle to axle in my complete frame package.
Yeah, I mean, like a bit more flex is like beneficial for like grip and everything. So,
yeah, it's a balance, right? You want the right amount, and from my experience, you don't want one weak link in the system because you feel it in that place first. You want the entire bike to have a linear flex characteristic so that it feels predictable.
Yeah. So when talking about materials, so we have like an aluminum mainframe, but we just had the topic with the steel frames. So what is your current, let's say, status of like testing like the steel versus the aluminum? Is there something going on, like you still have projects or like something in your head with the steel frame? Or is it more like, I've tested it, it's a lot of damping, it's a lot of flex, so I'm done with that and I stay with the aluminum one? Or?
At the moment, I'm pretty confident that for the bike that I intend to make, which is a World Cup race bike, the aluminum lends itself better to the intended purpose than the steel frames do. I think for the average rider, a steel frame performs really well. It has a very comfortable feeling. It deadens a lot of vibrations. But at the same time, while it can achieve that, it flexes more in highly loaded situations.
I mean, as a World Cup racer, we have a bit more loads, I guess, as the normal amateur racer. So
absolutely, absolutely. And I don't think that's a negative thing for customers or bike companies making bikes out of steel that I said that, because most of their customers probably really like the steel bike and it works well for them. I have tested 3 versions of a steel frame. The first one I felt was much too flexible, and then refined that again in the second version. And still a year later, this summer, I made a 3rd version of the steel frame that was intended to be even stiffer, with larger tube diameters, with a 3D printed bend in the down tube instead of bending the tube, so that the material wasn't stretched in the bend. Just trying to make the steel frame closer in stiffness to the aluminum frame. And I raced that bike in Leogang and Val di Sole and found it was an improvement, but for the goal of what we're trying to do, the aluminum frame just more easily achieves that.
Yeah, makes sense at the end. So like manufacturing wise, is it a focus of you and frameworks, let's say, to have the whole process, like the welding, the frame welding in America, in the US, like make it maybe locally? Is this an important point for like decisions of like material, fabricating and everything?
Until now, it's been the only way that I could do it. I wasn't prepared to commit to the minimum order quantity that a factory would require. So I was limited to what we could do locally, and being able to start out with only 1 frame and see how it worked without a commitment to more, and being able to refine the design and change it 12 times before committing to a larger batch. I would never be able to go through that process without committing to a big batch. So in the future, I think as we scale, and we also have refined our bike enough to where we aren't making those large changes anymore, there's definitely an opportunity to work with a bigger supplier. I always wanted to make the best bike I could, not the best American-made bike I could.
Okay, so like the results is the important thing. Like the result of the best possible bike is like the main goal, not to stay in America, to have like a US-made bike. So you would go to maybe the Czech guy you just learned to know here?
Absolutely. 100% my goal is to make the best bike I can, however that is. And I'm open-minded to multiple ways to do it. Of course, if all things are equal, I believe I'll have less headaches locally. So I'll do that if I can. But there's more than one way to do it.
Yeah, sure. Is there something like in the making the viewers don't know because you didn't show it on like your YouTube channel or something? Is there some new project, something you could talk about here?
This bike here is bonded. It was in my YouTube channel, actually. It's something new that we're testing out. It's a way that actually makes sense to do in small batches and do locally. Requires less tooling. It's more accurate for small batches. But honestly, aside from that, I don't have a whole lot of new things with the frame. For the racers, we're focusing more on tuning the suspension to work with the frame. Small modifications to the chassis we already have. This winter, I hope to do some test projects like the chain guide that I mentioned that had the idler pulley. That was something we could bolt to this frame and try different anti-squat and pedal kick values with the same frame. I hope to do something similar with a floating brake mount, that I can change the anti-rise values with the same main frame. I think there's small but usable geometry adjusts that I can do as well. You know, sometimes it's overlooked what some BB drop or a small head angle change can do to the bike.
Definitely.
And especially with racers like Angel Suarez, he's very critical and he has very experienced in test riding.
And demands.
Yes, I've learned that these small changes can actually make a big difference. You know, we don't need to completely come with a new product to make the improvement he's looking for, but maybe just a concentric BB cup or an eccentric BB cup that drops the BB a few millimeters can make a big difference. So experimenting with things like that, yeah, there's small details at this point compared to the beginning of my project, but can be very effective. There's also some new, again, bolt-on technologies. Like I have the steering damper right now from Patamelon. I got it 2 weeks ago. I've been trying it. It is very noticeable on the trail, and it's easy to turn it off and turn it back on and turn it more or less damping. So it's something that I think has a lot of potential, and I hope to test more. Mass dampers are very popular right now. I bought some from Countershocks, which is a US company making them for motorsports. And I've been testing them with my bike as well. I hope to ride those more through the winter. And small projects like that are what are in the works now. But I mean, the frame is not going to change drastically. If Angel prefers a lower BB and a slacker head angle, then we can make him a frame that's half degree and a few mil lower, custom for him, and that's totally fine. But it's going to be very similar to the bike we have now.
Yeah, great. I think a lot of viewers would be interested in, like, I saw your website and all your bikes are like sold out. So like the pre-orders are like gone. Everything worked well, you told me before. Like a lot of bikes were sold. When customers or like potential customers can buy new bikes? Do you have some kind of like time schedule or something?
Yeah, so the way that we sold our bikes this year was we took a pre-order. We had a window of 4 to 6 weeks, depending on if it was downhill or enduro, open, where the customers can order their bike, and then 90 days later, we would deliver that bike. And for us as a small company, this is a way we could do it without going into debt, taking loans, or taking a huge risk, because we would use their money to build their frame. And they trust us, and we deliver the product within the time scale that we proposed. I think to grow the brand, we need to reduce that lead time. We need to have the products in stock. I think more people, it's a toy, it's not a necessity. If they're interested, they want to ride it as soon as possible. I know if I was looking at a new dirt bike, I would want to buy that thing and ride it this weekend.
Yeah, of course.
So
it's passion like behind it. It's something different.
We're scaling up now to be able to have a larger batch in stock. With that, doing a larger batch, we can bring our price down a little bit, and we can make the quality better because they're not made in such small batches, and we can have them in stock ready to ship. So our goal is for the beginning of summer next year that we have frames in our, I will say warehouse, but garage, that we can ship to people as soon as they want one. And I know most of your viewers are German. We can ship them anywhere in the world. They just have to understand that there's VAT in each country. And we can't get around that. We are just starting out. We're based in the US. We don't have a distributor in Germany, but if a German customer would like a frame, they can pay I believe, around 20% VAT, and they can get the frame into their country.
Super nice. So last question is like, would you want to say something to our German viewers? We have a quite big fan base here. So a lot of people, when they heard that I will meet you here at the Craft Bike Days, they were like, oh man, Nico, crazy good, man. Ask him this, ask him that. Maybe he can bring an enduro frame for me, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, go on, chill, relax. But maybe you have something to say to our viewers.
Oh, it's just amazing to have support all the way over here. As an American guy, I didn't realize that people in Germany would be interested in my project, but in reality, we're all so similar. We're doing very like-minded things, and it's really cool that people on this side are following my project, and I really appreciate it. And I hope to visit Germany more. In the past, I've only come to Germany to go to Austria to the Leogang World Cup. So hopefully I can spend more time here and get to meet some of you guys in person.
Thank you very much, Nico, for your time. Answering our questions. Für euch Leute, danke fürs Zusehen. Wenn ihr Fragen dazu habt, schreibt es unten in die Kommentare. Vor allem, habt ihr Bock, dass wir vielleicht mal ein Bike von Nico testen? Ob es jetzt Downhill oder Enduro ist oder vielleicht beides. So I can ask Nico if maybe we have a chance to test some of his bikes in the next season. So we already chatted a little bit about that. Schreibt mal in die Kommentare, habt ihr da Bock drauf, wollt ihr das sehen? Ansonsten lasst ein Like da, lasst ein Abo da. Bis zum nächsten Mal. Ciao. Thank you, man.
Yeah,
That was great.